Yan Kuai Le. Happy New Year from cooking home, cooking abroad. I took a little time off to spend the holiday with my family, but now I'm back in the kitchen and ready to start cooking again. So, let's get on with it. Now, if you had asked me, 7, 8 years ago, when I was getting ready to move here, Adam, what food are you going to miss the most, do you think? I would have never thought the answer would be Chinese food. Moving to China, who would have thought that I would miss Chinese food? But as we know, real Chinese food here in China, traditional Chinese food, is very different from what we're used to back home, back west. And now many of the dishes that we're familiar with, like General Tso's chicken, sweet and sour chicken, mushu, all that stuff, is all loosely based on traditional Chinese recipes, but they've been westernized over the years. Since I think going back to around the 60s or 70s with General Tso's chicken was all the rage when it first came from Taiwan, I think. The ingredients and the recipe were changed to suit American palates, American tastes. And that's what we've come to know growing up. So one of my all-time favorite Chinese takeout foods was Chinese barbecue spare ribs. Behind me here. Red, sticky, saucy, little sweet, little savory, delicious. So tender, just amazing. I hadn't had this for years until one of my friends made me a dish called Char Siu, which Chinese spare ribs is based on. And that is a roasted pork in a honey and soy sauce and bunch of other ingredients. Now, this recipe does call for some more exotic ingredients, not for me here in China because they are Chinese ingredients. But for you back at home, you might not be able to get your hands on these. You probably don't have some of them in your kitchen to begin with. That being said, you can make do with just the 3 main ingredients: honey, soy sauce, and brown sugar. I've made that work in the past when I didn't have the ingredients I needed, and it does a pretty good job at making it work. It's not going to be as good, not as close to that original takeout flavor, but it'll do in a pinch. And that's our motto here: make it work. So let's get into the kitchen and go ahead and make some Chinese boneless spare ribs. For our Chinese boneless spare ribs, of course, you're going to need pork. This is about 1 kg of pork. Now, you're going to want to use a bit fattier cut of pork because as it's cooking, that fat is going to crisp up and just be so good. It's going to add a lot of extra flavor to it. Now, this pork I bought from the butcher is too much fat, much too much fat, and this still has the skin on there. So we're going to go ahead and cut that off in the preparation, but it is important to have a slightly fatty cut of pork. It makes it much more flavorful. And then you'll need some oyster sauce, honey, brown sugar. This is hoisin sauce or Chinese rib sauce. That's one of the things that might be harder for you to find wherever you are. And you would usually use Shaoxing cooking wine, which I don't have, so we're going to go ahead and substitute this Chinese white wine, Baijiu, in its place. The alcohol is going to cook off anyway. And some light soy sauce or regular soy sauce. 5 spice powder, which is pretty common in most kitchens, I think. And then just a little bit of red food coloring to get that deep, rich red color that you see in the Chinese boneless ribs. Again, optional, don't need it, but it will make it look more authentic. Now, as I said, some of these ingredients like the hoisin sauce, Shaoxing wine, might be difficult for you to find where you live, so you can get by with just brown sugar, honey, and soy sauce. And it'll make a pretty decent substitute. But for the full flavor, obviously you want to get as many of the ingredients as you can. So let's get in and start prepping. Let's go ahead and prep this. So first, let's get rid of most of this fat. Now, many Chinese dishes call for a lot of fat. One particular famous one is called dung po ro. which was named after an emperor or some other noble person in history named Don Po, whatever, whatever his name would be. And it is pretty much all fat and a tiny bit of meat at the bottom. Very popular here. I tried it once, way too much fat. So we can go ahead and just, as you can see, this does still have the skin on it, which we don't want either. So we're just gonna go ahead and take all that off, fat and the skin. All right, very important step for marinating. Aerate your meat. Just take a fork and put holes in it. That's going to let the marinade really soak in and absorb all the delicious flavor. For our sauce slash marinade, we're going to go ahead and use, we got here 4 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce, 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce or regular soy sauce. We use 1 tablespoon of hoisin sauce. Again, optional if you can't find it, not that important. 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing Wine, which I don't have either, so I went 3 tablespoons of Chinese white wine or baijiu, which should equal out the flavor roughly. Again, make it work, right? And then you got 1 teaspoon of 5 spice powder, 2 tablespoons of honey, and then just a dash, very small dash of red food color. Now it calls for half a teaspoon of the liquid kind, but I have this red powder which they use in Chinese sausages, and it's very strong, so I'm just going to use a small pinch. So let's do brown sugar, our light soy sauce, oyster sauce, our Shaoxing and red wine combination, and or in my case Chinese white wine baijiu, about 2 tablespoons of honey, thereabouts, I'll get that mixed up. About 1 teaspoon 5 spice, and then a pinch of red color. And that stuff is very powerful. And 1 tablespoon of hoisin sauce. And then we mix, mix, mix. Now, if I was making this for myself at home for dinner, for my family, I wouldn't bother with the red food coloring because it's just for decoration. Get that well mixed, and then we're gonna marinate our pork for ideally 8 hours overnight. But you can get away with 5. You can make this in the morning and have it marinating while you're at work and come home. You can see it's got kind of a nice, trying to get focus there, kind of a deep red color to it. It's going to look really nice in the final product. All right, so now that we've got our marinade, you go ahead and pour half of it. And look at that nice, deep, crimson red color. Comes from that food coloring. I'm going to save about half your sauce for basting as it's cooking. Again, we perforated the meat with a fork, so make sure this all that flavor soaks in. Just gonna make sure it's evenly coated. Now you're gonna let this marinate for 8 hours, so overnight or while you're at work. You can also just use a large Ziploc bag if you have one, but we don't have any in the kitchen, so I'm gonna just go ahead and wrap this in plastic and let it marinate in the refrigerator for 8 hours. So we'll come back in the morning and start cooking. Okay, so we've had our pork marinating overnight in the refrigerator. We got a nice deep crimson color in there, hopefully. Now we gotta cook it. So you'll need a baking pan of some kind and then some sort of elevated raised rack just to keep the pork off the bottom. Then I'm just gonna put some water in the bottom of the pan. That's just so the steam will help keep the pork moist. So we're gonna go into a preheated oven, preheat to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 218 Celsius. So we go in. And make sure you have that water on the bottom of the pan. That's gonna, the steam as it cooks will help keep the pork moist. And all right, so you've had them in for about 15 minutes now. And go ahead and pull it out and look at that, already looking beautiful. You're gonna take some of your leftover marinade and just brush, 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 brush. Baste, baste, baste. All right, so after about 30 minutes, it smells pretty done. And you can see, once you pull it out, a nice glistening glazed color. Go ahead and put one more coating of the marinade / glaze. Just get a little extra flavor and color in there. And there we have just gorgeous, delicious. Try a small piece. Yes, yes, yes. That is just like home. But, you know, American Chinese. So yeah, so try this recipe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, subscribe. You know how it goes on YouTube, right?